Quest. Are you all Questerific? Yes. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. It's a conference that means a lot to me. It's one of the conferences I attend where I get fed so well with all of the wonderful voices of the young people. So I'm going to talk to you here. Some of you will have heard some of the material if you were here previously, but I was thrilled to see how many of you are new. I am, as you've heard, a child psychiatrist. And I have a deep passion for igniting within each and every one of the people who encounter children to ignite the passion and the need for connection and relationships. So when I was invited to speak again this year, it was really about how can you take action. So I'm going to talk about a new resource that's been developed here in Ontario that's available for all. But let's just set the stage a little bit, just as our fabulous students have already done. And that is to say that we have to be thinking really very differently about education now. You know, there was a time when education may have been about preparing children for a known future where they learned certain skills and learned how to work a system. But now we are in a very, very different world. The purpose of education is even more closely tied to what Maria was telling us about. It's about human development. It's about helping kids, and I say teachers, being the absolute best that they can be, to reach their potential, whatever that is, in a world that we do not know what it's going to look like. And so I share with you here Simon Sinek, who says that the places that go far are the places who focus on what is the why of what you're doing, not what is the how you do it or what you do, but the why. And I've been, as Carol said, very involved in our education system, looking at well-being. And I'm going to put it right on the table, something that I said to the Premier in one of the very first meetings we had, our previous Premier. And it was, how can we balance the fact that we are driven by achievement? You know, we want to do well on that frickin' PISA, right? We need to get those marks, just get there. And yet we've got the tension that sometimes that pressure for achievement is what's contributing to our kids' ill-being. So how do we marry those two? Well, I'm here to say that what we need to do is stop and say, what is the why in the work that we do? And as we're thinking about teachers as human developers, I think, again, the wisdom of our First Nations elders telling us that the word for child in some Indigenous languages is he who has the light within. And when we think about Aristotle, if you ever, how often you think about Aristotle, but if you ever do think about Aristotle, you can think about him talking about education is more about lighting the fire than filling the bucket. Now, in my child psychiatry words, I say, let's stop stuffing the frickin' duck with all of our curriculum and start making connections and relationships and commitments to the well-being of our young people. So you're getting a flavor of what it was like for Carol working with me for 4 years. So again, thank you to Maria, because our First Nations people are telling us, and no, they're not telling us. They're saying, as I hear, I will tell you about my journey and share with you, but what you take from it is yours to choose. But she talked about what does it mean to be well? What does it mean to be a human being? And I'm going to suggest that we think about the purpose of education and look to the First Nations Mental Wellness Continuum Framework that says mental well-being is about having a sense of purpose, having a sense of hope for your future, having a sense of belonging, what Louise emphasized so strongly, and also having meaning in our daily lives. So, if we say each morning as we go into the work that we do, how can I, in the work that I do, in my relationship and connection, help young people? How can young people help me on the same path of meaning, hope, belonging? So we're not the only ones in Ontario who are thinking about this. This is a report that's come out, and it's an ongoing piece of work by the OECD. They have this Future of Education Skills, Education 2030. And in that, they're saying, maybe we've been, well, they don't say this, but what Jean Clinton interprets them saying is maybe we've been barking up the wrong tree. As we've been thinking about academic achievement only, what has been the cost? What has been the cost to the mental health and the well-being of our students, focusing so highly? And so these are the words from this document, and they say to navigate through uncertainty, which the world is, students are going to need to develop curiosity, imagination, resilience. I was just reading a paper recently that said the 4th R of education ought to be resilience. I say it's relationships, but relationships and resilience. And self-regulation. I don't know about you guys, but I specialize in the early years, and we have so many children in our kindergarten program, our 4- and 5-year-olds, who are having massive difficulty with self-regulation, coming along and learning to love learning. But what did we hear our young people talk about here today? They are having huge issues in terms of anxiety, managing that anxiety. I see that statistic that 57% of the young people feel that they matter to others at school. And you can be an optimist or a pessimist. An optimist will say, wow, 57%. A pessimist will say, holy cow, Batman. What does that mean? Just over 50% of our kids feel that they matter at school. Man, oh man, we have to do something very, very differently. They're going to need to respect and appreciate the ideas, perspectives, and values of others. They have many, many examples of how not to do that in the current world out there. I would say no more. I said I wouldn't be political. And they will need to cope with failure and rejection. Well, I don't know about you guys, but in the work that I'm doing, I'm finding more and more kids have this idea that if it's hard, there's something wrong with them, and they quit. They don't do things, they don't try as hard as they used to, or as they feel that they could. So failure, rejection, to move forward in the face of adversity, their motivations will be more about getting a job, and you can read the rest of this. Oh, by the way, the slides will be available for you. So here we've got the relational landscape is changing for our kids. But the brain is a social organ. We are absolutely wired to connect. The brain is a social organ, so it becomes hugely important that we make a relational classroom, that there is an invisible curriculum in the classroom, and that is that of relationships. We are literally wired to connect. That's how we thrive. And it seems as if a picture of my grandchildren's got into the presentation. But the point of this one is, is that we learn by serve and return. We learn by connection. Look at the beautiful face and the connection that you see there. We're a social species, but the relational landscape is vastly changing. The statistics that the young people shared with us are very similar to what we just heard from the Toronto District School Board as well. So let's just have a look at what Bruce Perry from the Child Trauma Academy talks about, that the relational landscape has actually changed. If you imagine that this is a clock, and each arrow is a contact, a significant emotional feeling felt, contact. This would be an ideal one. Well, I would hope that my children, I have 5 great kids, I would hope that this is what their connection map looked like. But you know what? Look how many kids that we would have who have this kind of relational connection map. How many of our kids are arriving at school, going through the motions, and not really connecting with others? And what's the consequence of that? Well, it's huge. Here you see the Ontario Student Drug Use and Health Survey showed that 39% of students report that they rarely or never talk to their parents about their problems or feelings. Does that scare anybody else other than me, the shrink? Huh? Isn't it scary? Now, what's really important for us in education is that we know the massive link between school and home connection. It's not about homework, doesn't have the effect size. It is talking about what you did in school today. It's about talking about learning at home, and our kids aren't doing that. And is it showing up? It sure is. We have our kids online. In another year, we'll talk just about the wonderful things about the social media and online world. But I am seeing, as a child psychiatrist, more and more social isolation. I'm not blaming social media, but I'm saying that we need to help our young people figure out how to manage the demands of the IT world, of social media. I had a patient recently who was stopped going to school. She was 10 years old because her Instagram, she had done a picture and her Instagram picture did not get as many likes as somebody else's. So she was too embarrassed to go to school. Man, oh man, we have to do something, and you have more stories like that. So here's the facts. We now know that our children are experiencing increasing anxiety, moderate to significant distress. We're seeing, you see here, 2013, 2015, 2017 is showing a trend upwards for all of these. Distress, anxiety, feeling that they were not well. We have to pay attention to this intensely. And here's a slide that you can't take a picture of yet because it's not published. I stole it from a colleague. So it's not yet peer reviewed. So don't take a picture, but I'll leave it in for the things. But so what do we know from a very big study that's been done here in Ontario again, is that the kids with disorder has in fact gone up. The prevalence of disorder has gone up to 18.4%. And also, when you think about the question of, has your child needed help, or the child asked, do you need help, that has almost tripled since it was first done. So I spend a lot of time talking to teachers, and they tell me the needs out there are huge. But here is a harsh reality that my friend from Manitoba first presented, Rob Santos, and that is, this is looking at the HR, the human resources available, and when you look at who's involved, nurses, doctors, social workers, psychiatric nurses, we will never, ever have enough resources to address the psychiatric needs of children. So what does it mean? It means we have to do something very different. We need to be focusing not just on, we need to focus on that group of kids, absolutely. But in schools, we need to be building the competencies, the capacities to flourish. Why? Because we know the evidence, and the evidence is that students who are flourishing do really well. And I love this slide here. Again, don't take a picture of it because it's not published yet. But this slide, if you look at it, what it's saying is in terms of externalizing behavior like ADHD, ODD, CD, those kind of things, conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, attention deficit disorder, that when you have terrific school relationships, school climate that's positive, boom, down go those disorders. And when you look from a socioeconomic perspective, you see that kids who come from social disadvantage, when they're in a school with high school climate, boy, oh boy, bye-bye those conduct and other disorders. You matter. Your relationships matter. And I'm working with Michael Fullens, who some of you will know of, who is a big guru in education. And we're looking to see if you focus on the competencies, the global 6 C's of collaboration, communication, citizenship, creativity, if you focus on them relationally as well as in your curriculum, do you actually see kids flourish? Because I believe that to be true. In fact, that when we focus on those kinds of skills and those kinds of competencies and attitudes and habits of mind, you make a difference in kids' lives and their ability to deal with things. So focusing on. So what do we know works? We know that people are doing tons and tons of different programs here and there and everywhere. But I want to give a very big shout out to my friend and colleague, Kathy Short, and her school mental, Kathy, yes, for her school mental health assistant. I see some of my buddies from Durham are here and some of you out there as well. So what the evidence internationally shows is that you need to think in a multi-tiered way when you're addressing mental health. School is a fabulous place to address mental well-being as well as to support children, young people who are having challenges. But it is not a place to be doing frickin' psychotherapy, because that ain't what teachers are trained to do. Don't become a psychotherapist. That's not what you're being asked. But, man, oh man, can you build the foundation for well-being solidly every single day? And you know that slide that they showed of the smiling face with the depressed inner brain is such an important message, that we think that our well-achieving students are well emotionally. We need to be asking and involving our students, and we need to be actively doing what I'm now going to talk about. What the educator's role is in supporting mental health. I'm going to suggest to you that you all visit School Mental Health Assist so that Kathy can go, oh my goodness, why are all these hits suddenly coming in? And she'll know that Jean's been around. That's it. So, but what is the educator's role? There are so many ways that educators make a difference. In the Ontario Child Health Survey that I was showing you about, the majority of students with need say that they want to be able to access it where they go. They're not that keen on coming and seeing weirdos like me in some place that they have to take all of those buses to, but when it happens in school, it makes a huge difference. Not treatment, but all of the other things that the educator's role is about. Creating the classroom, helping students build social and emotional skills, and that's what I'm going to talk mainly about. So what does this mean, social and emotional skills? Well, I want you to not think about, so do not think about, as I'm talking about social and emotional skills, all of the teachers that you know and your friends who completely lack social and emotional skills. Okay, I do not want you to think about them. But now that they're in your head, just think about our world today. Our world today, and how many of you, when you meet one of your friends, or you know my lovely niece and her daughter, cousin, are hairdressers, and they say, you know, the world has changed. It used to be people said, oh, I'm really busy, and now they say, oh, I'm really stressed. Everybody's stressed. Everybody's stressed. Now, stress is a good thing if you can manage it. Stress tells us, hey, pay attention, what's up here? So not all stress is bad. And this is a really important message, because when we think about the messages that we've been giving kids, say about anxiety, We have not done a very good job of telling our kids that, anxiety is normal. You're supposed to feel anxious before a test. But there's a difference between that kind of anxiety and such anxiety that you can't get out the door, that you're paralyzed thinking about what people are saying about you, and you're thinking that there's something wrong with you. There's a big spectrum. But we've taught kids about anxiety, and now when they experience normal, typical anxiety, they think they have a disorder. Instead of doing the wonderful thing that we saw demonstrated here, which is develop the skills like we all have, well, not all of us, but quite a few of us, of taking all of the things that wonderful student described, taking a deep breath, going into a quiet place, listening to music, going for a walk, dealing with typical anxiety, except we've made it diagnosable. So I don't know if this is the same issue that we have over other countries. So what it means, though, to me, is that we have to be focusing on the development of these social and emotional skills. And that, this is from Castle, a fancy definition, but for me, with the kids that I work with, I say it's about becoming the boss of your emotions. It's about understanding that what you think affects how you feel, affects how you act. And that to understand your emotion, that feelings are not facts. That there are things that when you have a feeling, it's really important to examine that. Maybe not in the moment, perhaps afterwards. But what do we know? Now the evidence, these were considered the soft skills before, and we never were able to measure them very well. And so the behaviorists who had this hard line, you can observe it, you can check it, so there was all kinds of behavioral stuff happened out there. But now we have the ability to look at meta-analyses, and we see that when you focus on social and emotional skills, actively promote them, kids do better. In terms of the SATs, the scores go up. In terms of kids feeling better about themselves, the scores go up. So focusing on how do I manage, express, and understand my feelings? How do I interact with others? You get better marks. You get better feelings of competency. So the School Mental Health Assist, working with one of the teacher federations, the Elementary Teacher Federation, said, it's all right to talk about social and emotional skills, but do we need to have more programs? And so they worked very hard together. They examined all of the programs that are out there and saw what are the elements out there and how can we incorporate them into our everyday interactions with kids. It is the drip, drip, drip of everyday experience that builds the brain. And so if we can help teachers have strategies that they can incorporate into everything that they do, it's not more work. It is the why of they became teachers in the first place. So the Everyday Mental Health Project is really looking to say, kids come with a backpack and there's tons of stuff in that backpack. Sometimes it's full of wonderful things, as my friend Kathy Short says, but other times it's hugely burdensome that we would hardly be able to carry it as adults. So what we need to do is make sure we have a priority, that we greet our kids at the door with a smile. We heard that with Student Voice a couple of years ago, that we work towards creating a sense of belonging. You are safe here. This is a place where you learn, but it's a place where you love to learn. So you create, just as has been described in the strategic plan of the board, safe and inclusive places for kids to learn, that you give them the skills for emotional development, that you make connecting a priority. In the work that I've done in the early years, we've talked about how when you, at the end of the day, think about what has been your connecting to correcting ratio. Think about that. In your daily act, I don't like to think about it as a mum because I know I'm frickin' at the correcting and directing end. I'm the grand party pooper of their life. I know that. But as a teacher, I encourage early childhood educators to really see, we know that the majority of questions that teachers and early educators ask are about behavior. Why are you doing that? What's that about? And so this is really examining, what are you doing in your everyday interactions with kids? So the group, the School Mental Health Assist, along with a team, look to see what are the components of social and emotional learning. So, but before I bombard you with all of that, and remember, you're going to get the slides, and you can pick and choose what you want to look at. What are some of the key things to remember? Well, it's like everything. Start small, go slow. So start small. So think about the needs of, in terms of social and emotional learning in your classroom. And so it's going to be very different, but it applies to kids throughout. Kindergarten, this resource is for the elementary years, but they also apply for the secondary years in different ways. But think about the social and emotional needs within the classroom. I'll show you, there are 6 categories. Pick one and pick some of the strategies that you can actually do, adapt it for your own class. So what am I talking about? What are the characteristics of the programs that they looked at in the 6 categories? Well, they're fantastic. They're fantastic and they are doable. So when we're thinking about the actions, how can you as a teacher, in your role as human developer, help kids identify and manage their emotion in themselves and in other people? And that's not about, as my friend Stuart Shanker said after he'd done a lecture on self-regulation, he observed a teacher in a classroom coming up, putting her hand on the shoulder of a child and saying, now self-regulate, self-regulate. It's not quite that. It's identifying the feelings. Oh, you know, I see that you've got your jumpy feet on this morning. What are your feet so jumpy about? You're excited. Okay, so why are you so excited? What can we do about your excitement? What will make you feel calmer? I visited a classroom, a kindergarten classroom that does a particular program on mindfulness. And I went over and talked to a little girl. They were doing all about the amygdala and the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. They're learning about all of these things. And this one little girl, I went over and talked to her, and she said, I'm taking a mindful moment. I said, oh, isn't that? Now, do you like being mindful? She said, yes. And I said, why? She said, because it makes me feel really calm. She was 4 years old. I said, oh, and do you like feeling calm? Remember, I'm a shrink, right? So do you like feeling calm? Oh, yes, I really like feeling calm. And I said, do you feel other things sometimes? And she said, yeah, I really, really do. And I said, do you want to tell me about that? And she said, nope. End of story. So identifying and managing emotions, relationship skills. So, you know, back in the day, did we worry about kids being able to listen and respectfully attend to others talking? Well, now we sure do, because what they've learned is the skills of the frickin' phone. You can text it, and you don't have to see the other person's eyes and their response. Positive motivational skills, optimism. We have so many young people who are observing the world around them, who are seeing their parents incredibly stressed. And what do they think the future holds for them? Well, I'm going to be talking to the people from the Netherlands, yeah? Because I want to know, how come your kids are so optimistic? What is it about our conditions that the kids nowadays are feeling so little hope for their future? I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are events happening around them over which they have no control. What we need to do is help them recognize what they can control and help them with the wisdom to know the difference between what they can and cannot control. So, stress management and coping skills, and again, I do not want you to think about someone that you work with or you know who could also do with some of these social and emotional skills. So the program, the resource breaks down everything for you. It talks about what are the core elements for stress management, pausing and reflecting. And then, guess what? You get your cheat sheets, or you don't call them cheat sheets anymore, right? Spark notes, whatever you call them. So every resource has with it a little card. Tells you how long it will take to do this exercise. You can download them from the website that I'm going to show you. So it tells you, how do you do deep belly breathing? How do you do it? And what I love, I don't think I've got it on this, is it gives you the scientific resource of where it comes from. So this isn't just somebody saying, oh, I think this is a good idea. There's actually evidence behind it. And don't we just love evidence? Don't we just love evidence? Yes, well, I come from McMaster, where evidence-based medicine was the definition, was first described. And I am sorry to say that there are a whole lot of things that we learn and we know that don't have any evidence behind them yet. But just because there's no evidence yet doesn't mean that they're not effective. Was that a double negative, Alan? You know what I mean? There's good stuff happens that we haven't been able to study yet. Right. So check it out. You can take a picture of this one. Everybody go visit. It's a fantastic, absolutely fantastic resource. So check it out. The SMH School Mental Health Assist.ca/everyday moments EMHC. So it's the little things. It's the little things. It's the things that each and every single one of us can do. And this is a really amazing resource. So how are we going to talk about well-being? Well, you know, I know that, and I'm really keen to hear some of the other keynote speakers who are going to be talking about happiness. Because I really am worried. When we know that kids are so stressed, we know that the release of adrenaline and cortisol affects their brain development. That when that adrenaline and cortisol are released and they stay up high, they affect the learning brain, the prefrontal cortex. And we know if that happens very early in life, it can have a very, very long effect. Early in life, meaning in the under 18 years of age. So we are absolutely essential that we figure out how to manage our kids to help them deal with their stress. So here's something. I heard this at Quest, and that is that the teacher creates the weather in the classroom. That's what one of the students talked about. So what I want to talk about just in these last few minutes is how well are we looking after ourselves? The teacher creates the weather in the classroom. It's imperative that when we're thinking about well-being, we're thinking about the adults who interact with children. That when we're thinking about the work that we do, I want to share some of the work of my friend Stephen DeGroot of Myriad Consulting. And he says that we are at our absolute best selves when we feel safe. So how do we, you as educators, you as administrators, help your staff feel safe, physically, emotionally, spiritually? How do you help them, and how do you as teachers feel significant? Feel that you are valued and valuable. There's a difference between feeling loved and feeling lovable. There's a difference between feeling valued and feeling valuable within yourself. How can you create that, feeling that what you do is worthy? And I tell you, the work that Carol and I did in Ontario, a learning province, looking at assessment, showed us over and over and over again that teachers value their autonomy and their ability to know their students, and the classroom assessment is where they can make the most impact for kids. When they feel safe, when they feel significant, that their words and their input are valued and valuable. And they also need to have a sense of purpose. They need to feel situated. They have purpose and direction. So the 3 S's of meaningful experiences: to feel safe, to feel significant, and to feel situated. That's how we can have better mental well-being for our staff, when our needs, values, goals, and strengths are aligned. So when we're thinking about mental health, we have to keep in mind you are not mental health professionals, but you are the eyes, ears, and hearts that make a difference. So we need to be paying attention to this, because again, from the evidence, and this is from my friend Kim Schonert-Reichel, that says that there is stress contagion. She did a study that showed teachers who had high burnout reporting themselves. They had students whose cortisol level, which is our stress hormone, was overly high. So none of us have an unlimited supply of energy, hope, creativity, and patience. We just don't have that. So we need to pay attention and look after ourselves. So I'm going to suggest that when we look at the everyday moments, we learn the strategies ourselves as educators so that we can best apply them. So, here's cognitive behavior therapy in one slide. What you think affects how you feel, affects how you act. Your beliefs about what your role is makes a huge difference in how you approach the children before you. Many of us have spent a lot of time studying Carol Dweck's mindset. We will not survive the coming challenges, and our kids will not survive the coming challenges unless we foster in ourselves and in each other a growth mindset. Knowing I can do this, I got this, as the kids said. So what do? Here we have what you can do. And this is at the bottom of that triangle. What you can do to promote mental health, setting the stage for a mentally healthy classroom, is have meaningful relationships. Relationships are the ingredients, the active ingredient in brain development. Know your students. Know something about them. My son, one of my children, had major challenges in school. And the teachers who made a difference in his life were the teacher who reached out and knew that he loved Pink Floyd, that he was a phenomenal drummer, that they could have little games about remembering which album had which song on them. That relationship connection, how long did that take? Well, I'll tell you, it may have taken 10, 15 seconds, but it's lasted for 15 years. 10 seconds to 15 years, not a bad return on investment. So know the students, have genuine connections. And then here, welcome the students. When you come in, you'll have seen there's lots of stuff on EduGains and others about teachers standing outside their doors with the little ones, and they've got a thing on the wall that says, do you want a hug? Do you want a high five? Do you want a funny hand signal, right? And as the kids come in, they're doing that. That is physical connection. That is saying, I see you. I see you. So it's welcome, include, understand. How do you get there? Spend the time to know your students. Look at establishing and knowing what their interests are, what they like. Care about them. So, what do all staff need at school? Again, this is my friend Kathy Short, schoolmentalhealthassist.ca. What do all staff need? Well, funny thing, it's exactly the same that all students need. A warm welcome, a smile, a connection to a caring adult every day, a chance to learn, a safe place to risk, someone who notices when something is wrong, someone who reaches out when they notice, someone who listens and tries to find help for them, someone who believes in them and instill hope. And what's it all about? It's all about relationship, relationship, relationship. It's about connection. I have a couple of key messages, and that is that love builds brains. The relationships that you build with kids absolutely change their neurochemistry. We've got if you want the hard evidence for that, I have it. But we also know that our kids who have had problem-saturated lives, even more than others, need at least one adult whose eyes light up when they enter the room. Imagine a world where that light within that child is reflected when an adult's eyes light up. You can be the change that changes the life plan trajectory for those kids. I'm hoping that some of the words today that I've shared with you are meaningful, strike a chord, and that you can go and you got this. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. My pleasure.